Welcome to the Breath of Life podcast. I'm Yulia. Here, we explore the world and our place in it through the lens of interconnectedness. If we could feel part of the living world, not just intellectually, but in our bones, if our breath could sync with the larger rhythm of life, how would that change the way we live, work, and make decisions? Join me for conversations with people who live and work from that place. Welcome to this beautiful conversation with Charlotte Rogg, a death doula, an artist, and an entrepreneur. What drew me to Charlotte's work was a couple of things. First, her love for mushrooms. And then there was this paradoxical mix of aliveness, energy, and death, her being a death doula. And the mix feels really coherent. So you're in for a special treat. Charlotte brings a lot of richness to the notion of seasons, beautifully connecting the external turning of the wheel to the deeper rhythms that shape our lives. Before you dive in, a disclaimer. My audio didn't fully cooperate this time. There are a couple of hiccups that editing couldn't fix. Charlotte's sound is wonderful though, so I hope it won't spoil your experience of this deep and engaging conversation. Enjoy. We're live today with Charlotte Rogg, and we're going to be talking about the seasons and living with the seasons and a deeper than what we usually mean by living with the seasons. Thank you very much for being here, Charlotte.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'll do a brief, potentially long introduction to explain how I found myself as a death doula, because personally, as of 2024, I had never heard of death doulaship and death care in general. So I like to kind of weave my story and explain how I got there. So originally, I was a writer and entrepreneur. I ran my own mushroom tea company from 2020 to 2024, and we were nationwide across the US in over 150 stores. And for most of my life, that was my dream, to start my own company, to have it focused on something that I was deeply passionate about, like mushrooms, and to be helping people benefit from functional mushrooms, have more access to functional mushrooms. But this interesting thing started to happen as we grew, as we gained more success and media attention. And I started to feel pulled by this separate force in life that I couldn't quite identify. I was spending all day working on my company Immoral, and then at night studying spirituality and mystery schools and spiritual ecology, like we were talking about, animism and mythology, and all of the things that I now deeply center in my life were more kind of fringe things that I wanted to spend all my time doing, but had this life dream going on that I had to focus on. And we hit a point in 2024 where I decided this is too much. Going nationwide into stores like Whole Foods and Target with a beverage brand is incredibly exhausting, and it kind of consumes your whole life. And so I made the decision, let's close down now while we've had amazing success and I can finally start to unravel this different life that was kind of calling my name. And I'm just beginning to synthesize what actually happened over the course of 2025 because it was so unexpected and surprising to me. Um, I had the loss of my company. I experienced the loss of an important relationship in my life. And then I started witnessing death everywhere I went. So if you picture fall 2024, the leaves were changing, the mushrooms were starting to compost the earth, that it was getting darker. I had just closed my company and I witnessed a car accident. I was the first person on the scene, called 911, watched as two people liberated from their bodies and died. And it was really impactful. But just one of those freak moments that happens in life. And then 2 weeks later, I witnessed another death down the street from me. An old man fell and lost his life. And I was the second person on the scene. And it was incredibly hard and tragic. And I still think about him all the time. But again, I just, my reaction was, that's weird that this happened twice in a row. And then it happened again and again and again. And over the course of end of 2024 and through spring 2025, I witnessed 7 um, traumatic accidents that I happened to come upon, all types of death, all tragic and incredibly hard to witness, but also so fascinating to me because I found that on the scene, I was always the person who was very calm and collected. I've always kind of had that ability in chaos to calm myself, to know who needs help, who needs support. In one case, holding a person's hand as they were being liberated from their body. It was so, so intense. And so by late spring, I was feeling, I think, an immense amount of grief, confusion, but also this pull that I had to study death and I had to figure out why I kept being the first person on the scene or the first witness of an accident, why I had lost an immense dream that I had of starting my company, why I was losing friends that I thought I would have forever for things that couldn't be avoided. And so I pursued the study of death all summer, all spring, and now in the fall, I am working as a kind of an apprentice death doula. So I can explain a little bit what that means. I was certified as a death doula through the University of Vermont's End of Life Doula program, where I received a certification. And what we do as death doulas is companion people as they move through the winter stage of their life into death and into the beyond. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do within the death doula community. I personally love focusing on life legacy projects. So helping people identify at the end of their life what their main thing that they want to pass on to their family and friends was, and how can we create a project that can outlive them and allow people to continue talking about them and discussing them. Because that was something that I felt intensely during this experience. I really wanted to memorialize the people I was witnessing and also provide some sense of solace and care to people who were going through that season of their life. There's other death doulas who provide bedside care and sit vigil with people as they move towards death, talk about spiritual care, emotional care, and also just plain old logistics. I think a cool thing that my teacher often talks about is helping her clients imagine what they want their death to look and feel like if they have the opportunity to do that. Where can we set up soft lighting and music that brings memories of your life? Where can we have people around that can support you? And so it's an interesting role. It fills a very unexpected gap that a lot of people find when they're dying or when their loved ones are dying, where you need that person who's not quite a nurse. They're not working at the hospice. They're not your friend or your family where you have past emotional weight. They're this kind of otherworldly person that comes in and provides some of the things that need to get done, but probably don't want to be done by the people going through the active grieving process. And so my experience over the year has just been so surprising and fulfilling, that I'm excited to talk about it, to talk about how seasons have a huge overlap with death and dying.
What an amazing story. And I'm wondering, so you probably now been processing, maybe not quite processed everything that happened to you during since 24.
Mm.
Do you think mushrooms played a role there? Like the mushroom company, do you think they were somehow involved in calling you into this?
I am so glad you asked that. Mushrooms have been my partner in death and grief for almost a decade now. I came to mushrooms in a lot of different ways. I think anyone who's into mushrooms, it starts as a little thing that is in your life. And if it's right for you, kind of consumes you. But I actually started growing mushrooms right after one of my friends was in a traumatic accident in 2016. I happened to go to a store with my aunt and she bought me a mushroom log. And I grew shiitake mushrooms and started learning about how mushrooms are this arbiter of death, this psychopomp esque, divine being in our nature that helps us go through that really confusing, hard process of dying and being reborn again. And now everything I learn about mushrooms shows me the shadow side of life, shows me how they compost and rot and connect plants together and move nutrients and reuse things. And so I think they've been a really powerful source of strength. But this year alone, I would say mushrooms and foraging kept me sane. Because I think now I can talk about what I experienced with some sort of levity. But while it was happening, it was so horrific. Like it got to the point where I started wondering, am I kind of attracting death? Like, is there something I'm doing? And I think a lot of people feel like that about mushrooms too. They're scary and foreign, and some are slimy and taste weird, and they are in areas that we don't typically visit. And I think that it's very easy to assume that these experiences aren't also moving positive things in your life. Death is like one of the number one things everyone fears and doesn't want to talk about. And so I feel a lot of kinship with mushrooms over navigating something that a lot of people just don't want to discuss or are afraid to kind of confront.
Yeah. Just yesterday, actually, I was in the forest here in Berlin, and one tree I'm particularly interested and drawn to at the moment is birch. And birch, of course, has a lot of partnerships with mushrooms. This was just so amazing. All the birches being eaten, giving themselves to create new life.
Mm.
So how they're so soft and porous, and having this beautiful mushrooms on top of them. The mushrooms making them available for the new life to come. I'm still kind of with it. It was a very special walk yesterday. It just gives you a different perspective on death. And not even perspective, it gives you an experience, because I think perspective doesn't really do much, or this cognitive understanding. The death topic is really fascinating to me, but we wanted to talk about the seasons. So, what are seasons to you? And I understand in literal, like nature seasons, but also maybe through the lens of being death doula. What is it?
Absolutely. I love that question. And I've been thinking about it a lot recently because I think if we think of nature as our greatest teacher, which a lot of people say, but I feel like I didn't quite understand until especially recently. The seasons to me not only mimic the full cycle of life, from a concept to growth to blossoming to harvest and then to eventually death and rebirth. It kind of gives us a blueprint of what our overall lives are going to feel like, rippled all the way out to humanity's life and then brought all the way back down to a day in our life or a moon cycle in our life. And so to me, seasons are, they're not only a tip off to the fact that we're all living in constant change and constant metamorphosis, but it's also a way of kind of making terms with the tougher parts of life, the things that we wish we could do without. I think of some of my friends and myself included who really struggle in the winter when there's less sun and when there's kind of a lack of color, a lack of vibrancy, a lack of sound outside. It's very quiet, it's very still. And how, for many of us, especially in America where I live, that stillness feels taboo and almost wrong. It doesn't really match our capitalist view of how we're supposed to be processing. We're supposed to be able to do the most and the best we can do every single day, no matter what the season is. And I always think of nature laughing at us and saying, that's not how it works. And in fact, you don't want it to work that way. Summer would not be the magic that it is without winter, and fall would not be the bountiful harvest without the planting in spring. And so I love thinking about it of just this never ending spiral that we're on, not only for our full lives, but also for just dealing with small things. Like, I'm thinking about the seasons of me moving into death care. The beginning was a winter where I was so lost and confused, and I wasn't quite sure why I was being called to work in death care. It was never something that I thought was going to be my career. And then in the spring, I started researching and planting seeds and ideas and finding teachers. In the summer, I studied and I learned, and I've been apprenticing, and now I work at a hospice as a volunteer supporting a much larger group at the end of their life. And then I imagine fall, where is this going to go for me next? How can I harvest everything I've learned, start giving back to people in the dying community, and experience rebirth, continue to grow on that never ending cycle. The other thing I would love to bring up, we were talking about before we started, I went to a class last night from Julie, let me make sure I get her name right, Julie Beeler, and she invented the mushroom color atlas. So for anyone who's listening, go online and type in mushroom color atlas, and you can see over 800 pigments that she's pulled from mushrooms from across the world to show the immense variety of mushroom colors and pigments. But the thing I was thinking about with the seasons is how colors shift rapid or drastically depending on what season we're in. So if you think of someone or something growing in the spring, it's typically more muted. We think of pastels and light colors. In the summer, you get like immense vibrancy. She was saying that green, the human eye can see more colors of green than any other color. And in the summer, there's more colors than in any other season. So we're kind of, every one of our senses is lit up during the summer. And it's like this immense amount of yang energy, um, you know, connected to the sun, connected to movement, connected to excitement. And then you think of winter, where the color palette is so muted. The sky almost matches the grayness of the forest and the snow below. There's not a lot of variation or distinction between anything that's growing or that's going through a rebirth process. And our bodies definitely experience that shift in sensation during the seasons as well.
Yeah. Yeah, really cool. And look, I can imagine. So as sensing beings, we are taking through this information all the time, and sometimes without our awareness. But even without awareness, we cannot help but being deeply affected by everything and by the rest of nature, because we're also nature. And so I'm wondering, so you were saying that, the way that you approached this pivot in your life that was unexpected was with the help of the seasons and the wisdom of the seasons and understanding them wider than just a change in vegetation and temperatures. So before that, what might it have looked like?
Before I made this switch?
All of us before were like,
I love that question. And that's a funny way of viewing it, because I feel like this year has unlocked parts of myself and connections to nature that I didn't even know existed. But I'm thinking about this experience I had while I used to work in corporate. I was a designer and analyst, and I would spend every single day inside in LED lit building, temperature controlled, fake plants, muted colors. Truly felt like I was going insane. Like, I could not fathom why we were all staying inside buildings all day, why we weren't outside in the sun, why corporations are structured the way they were. And I was not living by the seasons in the slightest. I would say, if anything, I don't even think I truly understood what the seasons represented or why they mattered, other than, oh, it's annoying when it gets cold in the winter, or, oh, it's really hot in July. And I think slowly over time, as I was trying to escape this corporate cage that I was in, I started fleeing to the woods as much as possible. And so, well, it seems like I've been living in alignment with the seasons for a long time because it's so embodied and ingrained in my life. I still remember maybe 5 years ago, thinking, what does any of this have to do with how we're supposed to be living our life? Like, how does the moon cycle impact us? How does the shift from the fall equinox impact us? I just didn't have any awareness of that at all. And actually, one of the things that I found so interesting, and I'm still quite obsessed with the Illusion Mystery School in Greece. It's a ancient school that existed a long time ago where pilgrims from across the entire land would come to this one school during the autumn equinox. They would consume the ergot mushroom, which is a mushroom that was used to develop LSD, the psychoactive drug. They would put themselves into the trance state and they would actually mimic the myths of Demeter and Persephone and relive the cycles of death, rebirth, and life in a short period of time. And how amazing it must have been for these pilgrims to get to experience the transition from fall through winter all the way to spring before actually living it. You know, anyone who's done psychedelics, they can get you there, but they can't keep you there. It's not like you can keep all the revelations that you have during that experience. But to go through that experience and then to go on and actually live it, to live through the death of all the nature around you, to experience the mushrooms eating the logs, the leaves decomposing, the animals going to sleep, to feel your body start to get drained because there's not enough sun, to notice what seasonal produce is offered to you, especially in the winter. It can be pretty slim pickings if you don't have an amazing farmer looking out for you. And then to go from that to the spring where things start to feel really nice again, it started to make me wonder how celebrating the seasons and celebrating these non-traditional celebrations, like the harvest, can actually make transitions and change a lot easier on ourselves, on our bodies, on our brains. And yeah, I think about that all the time. And I think about what it must have felt like to be in this mystery school practicing seasonal change.
Yeah. But what you shared and how you talked about your experience. And first was winter and then was spring. It's as if also normalizing so that there are different stages and that some stages you're not supposed to be working really hard and being super effective. It's just about, taking the time to digest or be in the dark, wait for the next stage or for things to integrate. And so I just wonder the way that we do everything in life is, well, we're gonna set a goal, then we're gonna manage a project. So that part of life that you also had, maybe, well, you adopted this change, but how would you see it in other people? How might they structure life or regular activities in a more season aligned way?
Isn't that the question? I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Because I'm in a unique position where I can pursue a non-traditional life and career path. Um, and I think a lot of people enjoy jobs that are or hobbies or passions that aren't very connected to nature and the seasons. And so I have been thinking, if we want to start microdosing seasonal change and adding small things into life, how can we do that? And I truly think the answer is going outside into the closest bit of nature that you have to your home every single day. Ideally at sunrise and sunset so that your circadian rhythm can start linking up with the seasons. Our bodies very much notice when the sun rises much later in the winter versus the summer. It's like we wake up to golden sunlight, and kind of observing that small patch of nature through the seasons as much as possible. I'm thinking about a park that I would go to when I lived in Brooklyn last year. I would go there basically every single day. It was like the most beautiful place to walk. There was always people around gathering, and the nature was very responsive to the seasons. And just watching how in the winter there was no volleyball players playing outside. There was no people playing outside. It was mostly just me and dogs and their dog. grandparents. And then in the summer, it was like an explosion. Not only were the trees exploding and the bushes were exploding and the flowers, but people were outside and talking to one another and things were happening and there was events. And I think the more that we can kind of expose our bodies, the more that our brains will catch up. A big part of my experience and my exploration of this very different type of life has been embodying something before I fully conceptually grasp it. I used to be the type who could read every single book on a topic and know everything about that topic and never actually live it, like living by the moon cycles or living by the seasons. I could learn all about it, but I would never actually make any changes in my life. Whereas now I try to do the opposite, where I kind of experience something first and grasp it later. And I think experiencing so much death kind of taught me that. Like if I leave some space in my brain and my body for an experience, I'll be able to understand it much better than if I just understand it with my mind alone. And I'd love to hear the same from you. Like, how do you incorporate seasons into your life? I feel like you're talking about it so often.
Yeah. And what you're saying is direct immersion and also allowing yourself to take in as much of what's happening in nature through your senses so that it kind of penetrates you more. And something was coming to mind. I'm part of this community led by two creativity professors from Canada. It's called World Making. And one of the things that they keep saying is that for emergent creativity to be there, for emergent solutions, the ones that don't exist right now and didn't exist before, we cannot really conceptualize them with our brain. We have to sense into the future.
Oh,
yeah, and it's interesting, all the academic professors, and they go for a lot of embodied somatic experiments and ways how you can just do things that just in the academic and corporate environment considered totally foolish. Like, well, let's sense into the future. There is no other way around it. Your approach is beautiful, and I think this is what I practice. We discussed a little bit before we went live that it feels now more quiet and the colors are less vibrant. And it's just really soothing for the nervous system, for my nervous system to be in the forest. And I just can stay still for 3-4 hours under a tree or on the ground. Just be there. And then things start happening. You don't do anything. You just sense. You are. And it's this elusive being that people talk about that for me has always had been very hard. But when I'm in the forest with the trees, trees are the beings that show me how to be, or mushrooms.
I love that. It feels like our minds get in the way, or at least sometimes when I'm in nature, my mind gets in the way, especially with mushroom foraging. If you aren't fully present, your eyes aren't going to see the mushroom, which can be a little bit maddening. If you're ever on a walk with someone who's very present and grounded, they're going to find tenfold what you find. They're going to find the tiny ones and the colorful ones, and they can rush right in and sweep one out from under you if you're not careful. And so I almost try to leave my mind behind when I go into the forest. I love what you were saying about the trees kind of taking in a lot of your consciousness and providing that thought so that you can just be as a body.
Yeah, and I think it's for me. So I've been doing this program about being a wilderness educator, and one of the foundational things that we do basically is spending time in nature with no particular goal. And but the goal is to develop pattern recognition system, and the pattern recognition system is something that allows you to spot mushrooms, but also it allows you to feel at home in nature. Somehow it's like you're not a guest there, but actually everything that you look at, even like those wilted leaves, they light you up. And you get curious and you can stare at them forever.
Yes, I love that. I'm thinking about this video that I went around that I posted on my Substack notes, and I know a lot of people did, of Robin Wall Kimmerer saying, we all need to go and pick berries. And I think when you first hear that, you're like, oh, yeah, berry picking is fun. But when you listen to the rest of what she was saying that intimate exchange, the reciprocity of you and going to enjoy their fruits and having a sort of like grounded awareness of where your food comes from. And also just like delightful play of berry picking is so moving and really grounds you in where you are in space and time. And I think something that I really need to write about and I've been thinking about is so I posted that video on Substack and I received so many comments of people talking about their favorite memories, especially with grandparents, with loved ones from childhood going to pick berries on the side of the road or in their grandparents' backyard or even going to a berry farm. It was like the memory was so strong and so unique that they were transported back to that point. I was thinking my great grandmother had a strawberry farm and I went when I was 3 and I don't really have memories from when I was younger, but I remember her strawberry farm because it's like the best experience in the world. What little kid doesn't love berries? And so I'm just thinking about like these driven interactions with nature where you're not really getting anything out of it other than like a bounty of berries. You're really just enjoying yourself in relation to nature and how those are the things that we remember. I've been having so many conversations with people who are closer to death, most importantly, my two 88-year-old grandmothers. They're both Virgos. I'm obsessed with both of them. And they, more than anything else, talk about the people they love and the experiences that they had with nature, which was so surprising to me. I was kind of thinking towards the end of life, aren't you going to be talking about your accomplishments or all the things that made you impressive in a capitalist lens? And no, like my grandma wants to talk about sitting up in an apple tree when she was 7 and watching her pet donkey walk by, which is like, I didn't even know she experienced. I had never heard that story before. But she's in this season of winter where she is going to die soon. There isn't much life and color in her life currently, and all she has is these like amazing memories of being outside, kind of developing that love affair with the natural world.
And this is kind of something that when you have those conversations, you understand what it is that you're here to collect. You're here to collect those and create those kind of memories. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, really beautiful.
Mm.
Can you walk us a little bit through this season that we are now in? Because it feels like all the other transitions in the seasons are somehow more welcome and less stressful. But this going into the fall, which then we're going into the darkest time and the winter, I think it's more than others. This change is met with a lot of resistance and trying to filter out the darkness and everything that comes in winter. So could you talk about what winter is about? Maybe like what we're here to do in this season.
I love that. I'm thinking about this a few different ways. I'm an autumn equinox baby. I was born on September 22nd. So every year I celebrate the equinox harvest and my birthday kind of in tandem. And I completely agree with you that there seems to be some sort of interesting thing that happens as you slide from fall, the most magical season, in my opinion, into winter around the late part of December. It's like you go from the most magical season on earth with so many holidays, so many celebrations, so many gatherings to nothing, like a complete stillness. Other than Valentine's Day, I can't think of any huge things that happen in winter that kind of ground us in community and celebration. Obviously, New Year's is an amazing celebration, but it comes with that weight of, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. I need to lose weight or change my life in some way. Like there's some sort of like panic that happens when everything goes still. And that exact thing happens as you prepare for death. I think of one of my grandmother's roommates. She's very close to death currently. She's basically on hospice, but hasn't quite made the decision to move over yet. So she's kind of navigating that. And what she was saying is one of the hardest things for her is going from being a very active marathon runner to someone who's basically bedbound. You go from this like unbelievably exciting life when you're in the spring and the summer and the fall, and you get to winter, the end, where it's supposed to be like this magical climax. And instead, it's just kind of like still and silent and empty. And I'm going off on a tangent, but I'll swing back. I think something I really have noticed with people who are in active dying or close to active dying is they're incredibly lonely, because winter is incredibly lonely. Especially for me, it's a time where there isn't that sort of distraction from the outside world. You know, not only are the colors muted, the animals aren't out, the birds aren't singing. Some of them have left and the others mostly stay quiet. There's no celebrations or festivals. There's not a lot of incentive to go outside because it's so cold where I live. And it's kind of jarring if you go from this like immense fall season, bountiful, celebratory, slamming into this really dark, silent season. So especially this year, after all the death I experienced last year and all the death I know is coming as a death doula, I've been trying to figure out how can I gracefully slide into the winter months instead of going from the highest of highs of the holiday season to the lowest of lows of, I don't know, February. I think is kind of the most what's a good word for February? Trying month of the year, instead of being like shocked and surprised every year. So there's like functional ways you can do that. You know, start taking your vitamin D now, get as much sunlight as you can because our bodies can store up the vitamin D. Eating a natural diet that's linked to the earth. So eat things in season, which I don't do well, but hopefully I'll continue to get better at. But like what we were talking about earlier with embodiment, the number one way I've been able to kind of make this adjustment a little bit easier on myself is just being outside, sitting in nature, like what you were saying, doing immersions, forest bathing, because that way, every single day, you're kind of realizing, oh, it's a little bit darker. Oh, mushroom season's over. That means like things have really started to settle. We're not going to see a lot of growth for the next few months, or we're not going to see a lot of sun. And it sounds like such a simple request. I think I used to roll my eyes like, oh, go outside every day. Of course. Like, of course I'll go outside. I walk to and from work outside. But I think what my body experiences is like, there's less birds today. And tomorrow there might be less leaves on the tree. And then in 2 months from now, there's no more fruit that I really enjoy. Like, I like pears, but they're not as bountiful in the winter. And so it's kind of this like acceptance that that change is coming and embracing it far before it becomes sort of devastating to our emotional landscape and how we connect with people.
And what is darkness about? All the darkness that is coming.
It's a good question. Let me turn it back to you, and then I can say, yeah, how do you feel about that? I'm still kind of navigating it.
Had a really interesting experience in my training, in the wilderness education training, where we had a scouting module, and 3 nights in a row, we basically played scouts during the night, and we just were crawling in the forest at night without any navigation. And I was very resistant to that. Well, because I'm not very good at navigating. Well, I keep orienting. I keep saying that maybe I've gotten much better because of these experiences. But what I realized then is somehow how liberating darkness felt, and somehow that a lot of tension of processing light and taking in a lot of visual information was not there. And in a couple of hours, I could see surprisingly well. So I think to be in lightness, we also have to go through the dark, as you said, right? Also, I've been reading books by Bill Plotkin, who is, yes, Winter in his model of development, I guess, is mapped against nature, is about being a mature, generative adult. I guess it's about being able to deal with darkness. Yeah, I thought that a coherent answer. It's just what came up in response to your question.
That is so cool. I felt nervous even hearing about you doing that. Like I've never nighttime scouted. I can't even imagine how stressful it must have been on the first night. And I guess I'm thinking about people who choose to meditate in the dark. It feels similar to what you were doing. I mean, obviously they're utilizing their body in a very different way than scouting through nature or tracking. But there is something to like removing some of your sensory inputs in order to kind of go inward. Like I think of not only darkness in general, but also like a muted sense in the world, the winter of the world. You don't have as much to rely on from the outside world. It's not like you have things dictating what your life means, what you're doing. I think New Year's Eve is so stressful for a lot of people because all of a sudden they find themselves staring down the barrel of an entirely new cycle of life and death, and they don't quite know where to go. Um, but I love what you were saying about how slowly, as you were sitting in the darkness, your eyes started to attune to that lack of visual input, and all of a sudden you could see things that maybe you wouldn't have even noticed if it was bright out. I'm thinking about last winter when life was just like immensely dark. It felt horrible. Like the entire experience started to get darker and darker and darker. And now that I'm sitting in the light on the other side, I'm like, wow, that was actually one of the sickest things I've ever experienced. Like, obviously, I'm so sad that those people lost their lives, and death is a really hard thing to navigate. The darkness is a really hard thing to navigate, but from all death comes an immense amount of rebirth. And if we kind of go along with it, like nature does, if we accept it, if we move it along, if we build our systems in our life to not only love the light, but also embrace the darkness, we get this kind of full sense of experience and reality that makes life worth living. And I'm also thinking about the myth I mentioned earlier of Demeter and Persephone. Obviously, Persephone's pulled down to the underworld during winter. There's no growth outside. She's trapped in Hades' hell. And it depends on which myth you read and you hear from, but in some myths, that sort of dichotomy between her being in the darkness in the underground during the winter and the immense brightness and bountiful harvests of the summer is really important to her. It was really important to a lot of the ancient esoteric teachings because life just would not be as full and as varied and diverse if we didn't have that cycle of dark and light. But I think I find it important to say I haven't gotten to the point where I'm looking forward to it. I fear darkness. I think I fear some of the hard things in life, and I think that's probably why I'm running in that direction because it feels so foreign to me and so uncomfortable.
Running in that direction.
Yeah. No one
Yeah.
knows why, but it seems to be my thing in life.
So we're getting close to the end of our super beautiful chat. So you are going to do something related to living by the seasons soon. So can you talk about it more, what you're planning and how people can join and experience it?
Yeah. So I think, are you talking about the mail club that I'm launching?
Yep.
So I am launching a mail club where once a month I'm sending out a handwritten letter to whoever's in the club, really focus on doing a micro mission that can help you integrate with the seasons. And this is 100% for me as well as anyone who else who wants to join me on this journey. I'm really trying to make it an intentional push in my life to make these transitions and these changes gentle and comfortable. So what I'm imagining is, um, writing about what it feels like to be in the dead of winter and going outside and finding the reddest berry possible, and then coming onto Substack and posting a photo and saying, "Hey, I found like this immense beautiful form of life in one of the most muted dark times of year. Or like on the flip side, it's spring and the geese are returning. Let's find a favorite pond where you can watch the birds come back and resettle into this new life, this new immense amount of growth. And what I'm aiming to do with the Mail Club is not only get us offline and get us more in a traditional form of dialogue and communication as a group, but also bringing those experiences back online so that our online world is just as connected to nature and the seasons as our offline worlds. Our conversations are tied to the seasons. Our little missions and adventures that we go on as a group are tied to the seasons. And as we ground ourselves in that continual change and cycle, I have a feeling, at least for myself, life is just going to feel even more safe and comfortable and familiar because I've been exposed to it. And for anyone who wants to join the Mail Club, I'm probably just going to make it part of my paid Substack with the ability to sign up separately. But I think what I want from anyone who signs up, as much as I want from myself, is to hear how other people are navigating the seasons, are living, it's not only seasonally, but also locally, are finding new areas of nature in their area that they had never been to before. I have one friend who watches a single tree for an entire year and develops a strong friendship. So I think that could be a cool mission to do 1 month, is to find a tree to befriend. And it's just such a fun creative project. I've never done direct mail before. I've never had a mail club. I've never even heard of mail clubs until recently. I think it's kind of a new thing that a lot of people in our space are bringing back. But I'm so excited. Like, who doesn't love to receive mail and have a shared thing to talk about with other people and to tell other people what you're doing? So that's the goal.
I think being together in the darkness makes a big difference.
That is so true. And especially at a time where there aren't those already built-in patterns. I just imagine it's going to be so nice in February, the month that I struggle with the most, I would say, to have a group of people in dialogue about like an interesting thing that they saw outside on their walk. I think it'll make me feel better, and hopefully will make other people feel as warm and called into the work as I'm hoping that they are.
Yeah, I imagine it's also very enriching because, again, as Bill Plotkin says, each of us sees the reflection of their own soul in nature. And so we react differently to different things and patterns and stories that we see. And then when we bring that together, I would assume it's a beautiful, big story is going to be created.
Yes, I love that. And he's so wonderful. I love all his quotes. I'm glad you reminded me about him.
Yeah. I was like totally fascinated by him. Thank you so much, Charlotte, as they would say in German. Thank you very much for coming. I learned a lot today, and it was super interesting, but also enriching. I got goosebumps a couple of times because what you shared really went deep. And thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you have this podcast, and as a listener, I'm just delighted to be here. So I appreciate it so much.
Have a wonderful day, and also wonderful winter.
Yes, same to you. We'll start preparing now.
Thank you for listening to The Breath of Life. It means a lot to me. If something in this conversation touched you, consider sharing it with someone and connecting in the process. Follow The Breath of Life for new episodes, and join me on Substack, where I publish my weekly writings. The link is in the show notes. Till next time.